everyone, and welcome. We know that there are a lot of worries and fears right now from our families here in South Burlington when we think about getting through this pandemic and raising children and making connections with the school. So we brought in one of our resident experts, Joelle Van Lent, who's a clinical psychologist, and we've been working with Joelle for the past 3 years here in our schools. She supports us with a lot of our social emotional learning skills that we're doing in our South Burlington elementary schools. So we wanted to have just a candid conversation with Joelle here around what it's like to be a parent in this time of COVID-19. I'm Holly Ruel. I'm the principal of the Gertrude Chamberlain School, and we're just going to be having a conversation here based on some of the questions that parents have given us.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kathleen Kilborn, the principal at Rick Marcotte Central School.
Hi, I'm Mark Trufilio, principal of the Orchard School. And Joelle?
And I'm Joelle Van Lent. I'm a clinical psychologist that has the privilege to work with South Burlington School District as well as many other school districts.
Great. Thanks for being with us today, Joelle. We've collected some questions from our families and things that they've asked us about or things they're thinking about that are on their hearts and minds. And our first question really has to do with being concerned, families' concern around what the possible long-term impacts could be on their children. And that's really in a number of areas, ranging from their own well-being to academic concerns, family relationship impacts, even social roles impact due to this time of pandemic and COVID. So we're wondering if you can just speak to what do you think about the long-term possible impacts of this unprecedented time?
Yeah, I think if we really did sort of break that down into their emotional well-being, their academic progress, and their social or relational development, and think first just about overall, could this time in our children's life have an impact on their well-being long-term? And what we know actually is that so the question is, does adversity actually make us stronger, or can experiences like this impact us negatively? And what we know is that the answer is it depends. So if our children experience this time in their life, overall believe that they sort of somehow prevailed, succeeded, they and their family, they and their school gained new skills, learned new things about themselves, strengthened, and made it through and sort of had ultimately a positive outcome, we know that that will actually make them stronger in the future, because as they go through their lives and new periods that feel really challenging, or they have episodes of grief or loss or other kinds of stress, they will have had a lived experience of, I've been through something really big and I did it before, I got through it, I learned stuff. So the sort of two of the key characteristics of resilience is that you believe that a better time will come and that you can see hope for an ending, and that you're gaining or learning things as you go. So generally speaking, this period is going to impact our kids. It is going to be part of their life story. And there may be aspects of it that they need to continue to work through, but it's very possible that it actually could make them stronger in the future, sort of depending on how that plays out. When we think about that second category of their academic progress, what I would say as a clinical psychologist that has for 20 years worked with schools and with learning and academic assessment and evaluation and support, and being like really in sort of in tandem with schools throughout this past 7 months, what we know is that having a long-term impact on students' academic access, so the remote learning in the spring, and now the hybrid learning and the way in which we're having to offer school sort of differently, there is no way that that won't have an impact on academic progress in the short run. So basically, the majority of kids are going to not be at pace with academic progress had they would be, or would they have been had this not happened. But it is also going to be okay. So the question is, what should we be doing about that? And how soon could we expect our kids to be at the point academically that they would have been had this not happened? So my educated guess is, generally speaking, as a population, 2 to 3 years. We are certainly not reasonably, as families, children, and schools, going to go through this school year, the 2020-2021 school year, continue to live through the pandemic, as well as multiple other challenges that are community challenges and global challenges and personal challenges. We're not going to live through that well and catch up on some of the impact. So it would be reasonable for us to expect 2 to 3 years to get kids back to where they would had this not happened. But in those 2 to 3 years, I see a clear opportunity to strengthen their emotional resilience, their social skills, their grit, their hardiness to challenge, and I see our full ability to get them back. But that sort of depends on our prioritizing wisely as we move through this and being adaptable. So then the third part of that is their sort of social or social or relational development. And so what I would say is that we just need to make sure that we are being persistent and not allowing social distancing, the inability to gather, the need to wear masks, to actually prevent us from connecting and communicating and playing and being joyful. I have the opportunity to be in elementary schools in this state every week, and I see elementary students actually better than any other age group, totally persevering. They are laughing, playing, communicating, connecting, and they are not letting the social distancing, the masks, and the fact that we have to live sort of in pods that are less intermingled stop them. So I'm actually inspired by the age group that you all have, and I'm getting ideas from them that I'm offering to the middle and high school, sort of around that. So that's sort of a general thought. I don't know what kind of that brings up for each of you.
I absolutely agree with you. I think the children in our schools are showing more signs of resiliency than the adults. I think it's easier for them with the mask wearing. Not that it's easy for any of us, but we are definitely seeing the joyfulness that you described. They're really happy to be back here in school with their friends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I would agree. I'm wondering about when I'm talking with families about, could you talk a little bit about, is there an order that those things need to happen in to be most effective? In other words, can we jump to the academic if the social emotional need hasn't been met, or sort of that hierarchy? Could you talk a little bit about that? Because that balance feels important.
Right.
And can be confusing.
Right. And I think one thing that's important to point out, and I think we've actually done a good job with this, is that as we move through this crisis, there's phases of it. And what we're going to prioritize is going to change. From like the spring, we had a set of priorities that were different in the summer, that are now different in the fall, and will be different in the winter. So an adaptable, resilient community doesn't get stuck in any one way of coping. So that being said, we do know that learning new things during a time of long-term stress is good for us. So it is good for the children to be learning new information and to be engaged in exciting and curiosity-inspiring hands-on learning. So we should be teaching them right now and academically, engaging them. But in a typical time, I think of our priorities as a clinical psychologist. When I think about what's optimal for human development, academic progress is equal to social emotional development and progress. Right now, that has changed temporarily to this. So academic progress is just slightly behind social emotional development, because that is what's going to buffer them from what could end up being long-term impact. It doesn't mean we're not engaging in stimulating learning and that we're not teaching. It just means that we've temporarily adjusted those priorities, because as a psychologist, if you gave me a child really of any age a year from now who was socially and emotionally well, but academically a bit behind because of the impact of access, I could catch them up fairly easily, and I would know exactly how to do that. And it would be a relatively short amount of time. But if I have a child who has social, emotional, mental health impact, and they're academically behind, or they're academically on track, but the impact, the priorities were off, so the impact is more on their well-being and their social connection, I'm going to tell you that that's going to be, I absolutely would know how to help, but it will take longer. And it will be a more kind of complex path for that situation. So wise priority setting now, based on what we know about human development, is going to actually put us in that best position in the future.
Thanks, Joel. That makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah.